The film starts off with a girl called Frances sitting on the subway. She gets up and just before she leaves, she finds a handbag just left there, so grabs it. She gets off and sees inside it and finds an ID showing the person who owes it. She tries to leave it at the lost and found department, however no one is there, so she leaves and takes it with her. She arrives home and meets her friend called Erica. Erica finds the bag and looks to see what's inside. Erica finds cash and tells Frances to take the money, however Frances says to leave it as she won't take someone else's money. They go cinema that night and Frances gets upset as we learn her mom is no longer with her and she hasn't spoken to her dad, so they go home after the movie ends. The next day Frances is walking back from work and stops by the bag owner's house. She knocks on the door and we learn the bag belongs to a woman's name called Greta. Greta thanks Frances for bringing the bag and offers a coffee and tells her to come inside. Greta brings some coffee and they begin to get to know each other. A noise occurs and Greta explains it's the neighbors and shouts telling them to stop. They talk and Greta shows pictures of her family and explains her is in France and husband died and begins to plan the piano, saying this is what her husband taught her. She then shows a dog picture and explains he is gone too. Frances begins to feel bad for Greta and offers to help her choose another dog. Greta asks if she can have her number and Frances agrees. Later that evening, the girls are at home and the phone goes off. Erica answers and says to Frances it's someone on the line called Greta. She gives the phone over and Greta asks if she is free tomorrow to go dog shopping and Frances agrees. Erica finds this weird and tells Frances to chill as the city will eat you alive, warning her. The next day, Greta and Frances are dog hunting, and while looking, one of the dogs catches Greta's eyes. She pets it and chooses this one. They go out and take pictures and Greta asks about Frances and her family to get to know her a bit better. And here we learn Frances's mom died a year ago and doesn't want to forget her, however Greta explains she never will and you always remember her in your heart. Later that night, Greta is at home and begins stalking Frances's Facebook and texts her late at night. She then texts her saying the dog is settling well, however Frances airs it and goes back to sleep. The next day, Frances is at Greta's house talking to her while she plays the piano, and Frances feels bad for Greta as she comes along as lonely and doesn't have anyone. Frances then tells Greta she doesn't have to be lonely, and Greta says everyone leaves and says she isn't surprised if Frances disappears as well, however she describes herself as gum and always sticks around. Greta acts happy and makes her promise she won't leave and Frances promises she won't. The next day, Erica and Frances are at home together and Erica talks about going out tonight with her friends for a party, however Frances says she can't and declines the offer as she already made plans with Greta and says she will another time. Erica explains that this is getting weird as she feels that Frances is getting too close to Greta. Erica then tries to call Greta, however Frances takes the phone off her. Erica then gets annoyed and tells Frances that this is sad because she says that Frances is trying to replicate Greta as her mom, however this pisses her off and she leaves. Later that night, Frances and Greta are cooking for dinner, having a nice time. And here we learn that Greta explains she has a daughter called Nicola who still lives in France, but she can't see him. While Frances is getting the table ready, she asks Greta where she keeps the candles and she says they are in the cabinet. Frances then opens the bottom drawers and finds multiple handbags that look like the one she found. She goes through them and finds another person and her name with her number, creeping Frances out. Greta calls out if she found them and she says yeah. They eat dinner, however Frances now starts acting uncomfortable and Greta asks what's wrong. Frances says she started feeling unwell and says she needs to go home. Greta says if she wants to get a plate and tries to help, however Frances swiftly leaves. She gets home and tells Erica what she saw and explains how weird and creepy she must be. The next day she calls Frances, she declines. She gets to work and Greta has been spamming her all day, so she calls Erica and even says Greta has been calling the landline all day so much she had to unplug the phone. While on the phone, the manager comes home and tells Frances there is someone here to see you. She goes out to have a look and sees Greta. She tells the manager she doesn't want to see her, however he just says to get rid of her because he's CBA himself. She goes to her and questions Greta on what she is doing here. She says she is worried and Frances cuts her up and confronts her about the handbags and calls her out on being a weirdo. Greta tries to explain, however Frances walks away and tells her to leave. The next day she hears Greta's voicemail and tries to make Frances feel sorry for her, however she keeps it moving. The next day Frances and Erica are at home and the doorbell rings. Erica thinks they are for her, however the man says they are for Frances. They look at the note and they are shown to be from Greta. Later on, Frances is at work, however she drops a glass as she sees Greta outside watching her, so she gets the work staff to call the police. The police arrive after a while and Greta is still standing outside watching her. The cop explains that according to the law, he can't do nothing as she is standing in a public spot and recommends her to stop giving attention and she should leave. Yes, I know this is what we call policing. When she finishes her shift, she doesn't see Greta, so she checks the camera to see if the coast is clear, then she leaves. She gets on the subway, but then Greta appears, so Frances leaves while Greta gets stuck. She arrives home, she finds Greta waiting outside her door. Frances gets angry and tells her to stop following me, and Greta tries to explain to her that she needs a friend and says Frances said to her she sticks around like chewing gum. Frances tells her to leave and Greta spits at her saying she is going to regret it, then leaves. Erica and Frances go to the police to report it, apply for restraining order, however the cop says it can months to wait for the courts as they are overcrowded. Frances gets worried about the dog she got with Greta, and so she goes to her house, almost getting caught when Greta leaves. Frances goes through the bins and finds mail sent from Greta's daughter, as she is now confused as she is meant to be in France. She tries to make call about Nicola, however she does find anything. The next day Frances arrives home from work and gets paranoid in her own apartment. Erica calls her saying to come out and meet her, however Frances says she prefers to stay inside. The phone goes off and Frances answers the phone talking to her dad. Greta sends a picture of Erica taunting her. Frances calls Erica straight away, telling her to leave as Greta is behind her and is taking pictures. Erica looks behind and doesn't see anyone, and so she leaves. While leaving, Frances is on the phone to Erica saying Greta is still behind her as she keeps receiving pictures. Frances makes a move to meet her, and while Erica escapes, she gets on the bus and sees Greta. She calls her out and leaves the bus. While getting away, she almost gets hit by a cab, however she just misses it and gets in the cab as Frances is already inside. They reunite and they escape. The next morning, Greta's daughter calls Frances and says she would like to meet. Frances goes to a coffee shop and meets a girl called Alexa. She explains she was Nicola's friend, and she explains she killed herself 4 years ago. She explains since she died, Greta has been a very ill woman and lied about her being French and Nicola ever going Paris. Alexa explains she tried to save her, however she is too lost. While at work, Frances gets a call from her dad, worried as Erica had told him on what's been going on, however she gets told off at work and gets back to her job. She goes to a reserved table where she finds Greta. This freaks her out and drops everything. Meanwhile, the manager comes out, takes Greta's order. Frances is forced to serve her and Greta says to her that wants to talk, but Frances just tells her to stop following her. Greta then begins making Frances feel more and more uncomfortable, making her tell her work college to call the cops again. Frances goes to serve Greta, however she begins to make a scene and goes crazy, going after Frances at the restaurant. This eventually gets Greta kicked out. The next, Frances finds out Greta has been released, pissing her off. Erica suggests to meet Greta and apologies and explain to her that it's herself and needs to go away to deal with some issues. Frances then meets Greta at the church and sweet talks her, saying sorry and says she will be leaving. Greta comes as understanding and says to Frances she will wait until she comes back, creeping Frances out but keeps it cool. Greta questions her, saying she wouldn't lie to her, and Frances says of course not and leaves. Greta drugs her dog's bowl and feeds it. The next day Frances gets home and notices leaving from the plant. She calls out for Erica, but then gets dozy. While on the floor like a sloth, Greta appears and takes her home. They arrive home and we see Greta's hidden room where she takes Frances. Frances then wakes up and is woken up when her coffee is done. Her dad is outside and says goodbye to Erica as she is going away for a bit. She gets in the elevator and it begins to close in on her, making her waken up and realize the Greta scene wasn't a dream. She bangs against the box and Greta opens it. She then starts to explain that she is pissed because she knows Frances was not going to leave and was just lying to Greta. Frances begs her to let her go, and surprisingly, she keeps the box door open, however she locks the hidden door. Frances tries to look for an escape, but finds out she is stuck. She finds a previous victim card, and this gets Frances angry. Greta gets Frances's phone and sends out texts acting like Frances is fine, and Greta spends her time listening to her voicemails. Her dad sends a voicemail and Greta hears that he's coming in to see her. He arrives at her house and asks Erica where she is. However, we learn Greta had played both of them and made them think they went on holiday with each other. The dad goes to a private investigator and pays him to look for her. Greta drugs Frances's drink and lets her out her room. Frances is forced to drink the glass and knocks out. The next day, Greta is teaching Frances how to cook. Frances is watching, but then she hits Greta, chopping her finger off, and tries to escape. She tries to get away, however the doors are locked, so she runs into the basement where she finds someone else in a body bag. Greta then comes from behind and takes her out. Frances wakes up in Greta's bath naked, and after she ties her up to her bed. The private investigator arrives at Greta's house and knocks on the door. He gets no answer and Greta arrives. He talks to her and questions if she has seen Frances and denies she's seen her. However, she offers him to come inside. While they are sat down, Frances wakes up and bangs against the wall and Greta puts music on. However, she excuses herself, acting like she needs to feed her dog. The detective gets suspicious as he sees the knocking coming from the wall, and so he opens up the secret room. However, Greta injects him with a substance and tries to shoot Greta. However, he passes out. Then Greta gets his gun and kills him and hides his body. As time goes on, Greta carries on leaving bags on the subway, and a new victim knocks on the door. While a victim is talking to Greta, Frances bangs against the wall and Greta says it the next door neighbors and tells them to stop. While talking to the victim, Greta sits down. However, she begins to feel dizzy, and the victim turns out to be Erica as she set up Greta. Erica gets up and looks for Frances and finds the secret door. They reunite and Erica unties her. Before they leave, piano music starts playing and Frances begs Erica her not to go as she warns her that Greta will hurt them. Erica goes out and stops the music, while Frances gets grabbed but then passes out. They put Greta in a box and lock it. They both then sit and reunite, and Frances asks how long she's been there for, and Erica responds too long. They go outside for air while Greta from inside bangs on the box. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more. We will see you on the next one.